Good evening or afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Tech Topics Common File Types. My name is Tanisha with Hillsborough County Public Library, and I am joined here with James, also at the library. How are you doing this evening, James?
I'm doing all right.
All right, James. Well, I'm going to go ahead. You know, we kick things off, so I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to you. Go ahead and take it away.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Tech Topics Common File Types. And as always, with our Tech Topics, we always start with a resource shout out. So the resource I'm going to go ahead and shout out is one we have online called Universal Class. Universal Class is a great digital online learning resource that you can access with your library card from our website at hcplc.org. Just look for learning and research and you can find it in a list of resources there. With the topic that we're covering today, one you might want to look for on Universal Class is called Computer Literacy Level 1, Computer Basics. It'll be very, very similar. It'll cover some of the material that we're covering here today. So with file types, what is a file type? A file type is basically a standard way that information is encoded for storage on a computer. What does that mean? When you're working on a document or something like that and you want to save it, it's saved as a file. The file is just the way that it appears on your computer for you to go ahead and share it or open it back up and work on it at a later date. There are two basic file types and file standards. I'm going to say file type and file format or file standard. They're all basically the exact same thing. It's just, like I said, how information is saved. So there are common file types and there are proprietary file types. A common file type is a file type that's widely available and useful by a whole bunch of different computer programs or easy to use computer programs. So like an email. Pretty common file type. We usually open up in many different kinds of email programs, and there are other ones that are pretty common as well, like PDFs. You can open it in an easy to get PDF reader. That's a common file type. Proprietary file types are ones that are used by specific programs and usually can't be opened very easily by other programs. So if you're working with digital media, say for example, like Adobe, usually those Adobe files will open only in Adobe programs or very, very specific programs that are made to open Adobe files. And usually those programs are really expensive. So pay attention to what you're doing to see if your file is common or proprietary. So whenever you have a file on a computer, if you right click on that file and go to properties, you can look in the description for the file to see the file extension, and that will tell you what your file type is. The extension, if you have it set up on your computer, you usually have the file name, then it'll have a dot, like the period, end of sentence, and usually 3 or 4 letters behind. The 3 or 4 letters behind the dot is your file type. So for Word documents, the file extension is .doc or .docx. For Excel, it's .xls, .slsx, and for PowerPoint, it's .ppt and .pptx. So when you're working with Microsoft Word or any of those kind of documents, make sure it has one of those file extensions at the end. So that way, when you share it, someone else can open it within Microsoft Word. There are other word processing programs or other programs that will do similar things to Microsoft Office that don't have these file extensions, which may or may not open in Word, and Word documents may not open those particular programs and vice versa. When it comes to media files, there are quite a range of different ones. I'm talking about photos and videos and different kinds of digital art and such. There are two basic kinds. There are compressed and uncompressed. The reason I'm mentioning both is because those will be different file types. If you're working with digital media, you have to know the difference between compressed and uncompressed. Compressed is usually a smaller file, but it has less data in it. So it's ideal for sharing like a finalized project. So imagine there's a very, very like large poster that you're working on. Something that, is very, very large that you can kind of go ahead and put on a wall. Usually you don't want to send a really, really large version of that. If you just want to show someone like, hey, this is what I did, you would send them a compressed file, which is usually smaller, which if you try and blow it up, it doesn't look as good, but it's really, really good for sharing. Uncompressed are very, very large files with much more data. They're ideal for working on a project, but sometimes can be extremely large depending on the type of file that you're working with. So imagine that same poster that an artist is working on. If they want to go into detail, they have to have that uncompressed file so they can zoom in and work with all the little details of that particular file. If you try and take a compressed file and blow it up, it usually doesn't have all of that little detail in there. And it's the same with pictures, with video, and with audio. So like I said, with images, audio, and video, there are a couple of different kinds of file types for images. There are JPEGs and PNGs. Usually the JPEG is more compressed. Usually the PNG is more uncompressed. For audio, there is MP3 and WAV files. Usually the MP3 is the compressed type, and the WAV is the uncompressed type. So if someone is working on a song or something like that, they're going to work on that song with the WAV file format, so they have all that detail in the audio, and then when they send it off to play it somewhere else, it's usually going to be playing as an MP3. For video, there's MP4 and MOV files. MP4 is the compressed or smaller version. MOV is usually the much larger version. And especially when you're working with digital files like these, there can be a very, very extreme difference in file size. So for example, if you're viewing a video, if you have a .mov file, you can have a video that can be multiple gigabytes large in terms of size. When you compress that down to an MP4 file to view on like a phone or a tablet, that could be maybe half a gigabyte. So it can compress it down 10 times or more, depending on how much you're compressing it. A couple of other common files that you'll find are web pages, portable documents, and Windows programs. So common web page file extensions are .htm and .html. So if you see a .htm or .html, you know that's going to open up in your preferred web browser, whether it's Chrome or Firefox. PDF is a portable document format. It's proprietary from Adobe, so they're easy to share and easy to open. They're not easy to edit, but they are very, very common, and it's the easy way for everyone to share documents, so you're going to see those quite often. Also for like Windows programs, if you go into your hard drive on your computer and you look for all your Windows programs like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and you try and open them from directly inside your file explorer, you're going to see a .exe behind that. That tells you that file is executable and you can run that particular file. Now I know that's a lot of information, but remember, you have compressed and uncompressed, you have proprietary and common file types. And then depending on what you're doing, you can do a little bit of research and find the ones that are most common. This is not an all-encompassing list of everything that's out there, but these are some of the more common ones. A couple of things to be aware of, a couple of things to remember. Depending on the program that you're using, pay attention to what particular file types it's compatible with. So say, for example, you're working with Microsoft PowerPoint, you're doing like a presentation, you can take a PowerPoint slide and work on that slide and save your file as a PDF. You can save it as a video, you can save it as an image, either as a PNG or a JPEG. And it can oftentimes import those files as well. Some programs kind of do quite a bit and will open a whole bunch of different files, but may not necessarily save by default in that particular file type. If you're getting a file from someone, you need to make sure that you have a program that will open that particular file. So if for some reason it doesn't open in any program that you have access to, you can ask the person who sent it to you to create a more common file type version of that particular program. Some programs may default to a proprietary file format. So I mentioned the Adobe programs like Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop. When you're working within that program, it'll usually save it as that particular program, file as an Illustrator file or a publisher file. Once you're finished with your document, for you to share it and make it a more common file type, you need to look under the file menu for either save as or export. And you'll usually have options for how you want to save that file or export that file. So usually be able to save it as a JPEG or a PNG or a GIF or something along those lines. That's a little bit more common, that's a little more accessible to people. Apple programs, generally speaking, usually deal with their own proprietary file type. So if you're using like Apple Pages or Apple Numbers or Keynote, which is the Apple specific versions of like Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, usually those will save in like a Pages file or a Numbers file or a Keynote file. So if you want to share it with someone that doesn't have a Mac or only has access to Microsoft Office and Microsoft Word, you need to make sure you export those files as a Word compatible, Excel compatible, PowerPoint compatible file type. Also, if you're working with media files like images, audio, or video, it's always best to do all of your work with an uncompressed file, so the really, really large ones. And then when you're finished with your project or you're ready to share your project, then you can go ahead and compress it and share it as a different file type because you don't want to lose any of that data in there. So that is all the basic information for common file types. Anyone have any questions?
All right, James. Yes, there are a few questions. So we have somebody asking, and you already covered like some of the Mac proprietary files, but would you have any issues opening other files up on a PC versus Mac? Like, will these files open up on both? These file types open up on both?
For the common ones, yes. So like a PDF or a .doc, they should, as long as you have the appropriate program for it. So most computers don't necessarily come with programs that will open all of these files by default. You'll have to go online and find a program that does. But there are usually a lot of free or open source options for you to be able to at least open and view these files that are compatible with both PCs and with Mac.
All right, and then we have somebody else asking, are some of these common file types more secure than others?
They're really about the same. The real security is going to be with how you share it. So if you have a picture, you save it on your computer and you don't connect your computer to the internet, that picture is going to stay safe on your computer. You're not sharing it anywhere. I know with some cell phones, when you take pictures on some cell phones, they may have some location data, like GPS data attached to them, but that should be an option within your cell phone to turn it off, and that option is going to be different whether you're using like an Android phone or like a Samsung phone or a Google phone or anything like that. But you should be able to go into your options to be able to turn that off if that's something that you're really, really concerned about. Something to look into when looking into these file types is like what sort of properties they have. So I mentioned for images specifically like PNGs and JPEGs, they're both basically pictures, but they function a little bit differently. So say, for example, you have a JPEG. JPEG is basically just like a big square or rectangular photo. A PNG actually can have different shapes. So usually if you have like a logo that you're going to post somewhere, you want that logo as a PNG so you can get the actual outline of that logo and show the background behind it. So a little bit more research. Everything is about the same bit of security.
Okay, we got one more question here.
Okay.
Somebody is asking if there's a difference between a doc and a docx file. They're saying that they are trying to open a docx file on their phone, and it says that this format is not supported.
There is a little bit of a difference in DOC and DOCX files. The docx file has a little bit more information behind it, a little bit more like formatting information. Usually for most devices, if you can open a .doc file, usually you can also open a .dox file. So on your particular device, you may need to look into finding another program that will open that particular file for you. I can't say for certain because, of course, I don't see your device, but that's usually the issue. With computers nowadays, if it can open a .doc, it can usually open a .docx file.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And if you can go ahead and go to our closing slide. And those were wonderful questions from our audience. So as always, we wrap everything up with our contact information. If you need to get a hold of us by phone, email, text, chat, you can go ahead and contact us. Also, we have our programs and events link. Right now, we are smack in the middle of summer reading. We have some fantastic programs lined up for you. So definitely check out our events calendar. Make sure you're logging your reading hours on Beanstack. Make sure you're doing all of the summer reading things, because we do have some really wonderful things for you lined up. And of course, the next topic for next week is graphic design tools for non-designers. So this is specifically for people who do not have graphic design experience. The link is available in the chat, desktop or laptop, chat section of the control panel. Tablet, just tap on the little people icon and you'll be able to access it there. James, thank you so much for this information. This is a nice, good, practical one. This has some great information for everybody just to know what type of file types they're dealing with. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, y'all. Take care.
All right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close things out. Good night, everybody.
Good night.